Twice a month? Once every 6 months?
I would say twice a year.
Twice a year. God almighty.
Well, what does one say? Every day if you really do it.
Well, that's what it says. I'm not talking about the ideal, I'm talking about people. Twice a year. Whoa. Okay. Even I never heard of that.
She said twice a month, and I was like,
well,
I don't think they do it.
The babies come from storks. They're FedEx. Their ID sign for them. There is some truth to what you're saying, insofar as Newsweek magazine, if you remember this, Newsweek did a cover story last October about how 1 out of 3 young married couples in America have not had sex in years. 1 out of 3 marriages in America are completely platonic. But the national average is once a week. Once a week. Sounds like a lot. 50 times a year, it's not bad. 50 times a year. Until you read on in the statistics. You know how long sex lasts between the average? You guys never get married now. The average married couple, you know how long it lasts? You're getting married next month. You and I need to talk. Okay? No, it's actually 3 minutes as if they're on Viagra. The average is 7.5 minutes. 7.5 minutes. And when I used to quote this American statistic to my English listeners when I lived in England, they'd say, "My God, who are these American husbands? Superman!" How did they do that? Whoa! So you see how the erotic passion is disappearing, and why we've fallen back in compatibility, which in turn has made marriages and relationships very weak. But compatibility is what everyone's looking for. In fact, sheer height. The great sex researcher, if you heard of her, feminist, she and I had a debate about this at Oxford University years ago. She came to world attention, to world prominence, when she discovered a fascinating statistic that 84% of men date women they're strongly attracted to, but they don't marry them. They then marry women with whom they have the most in common. Isn't that interesting? They actually compartmentalize the two in their minds, because no one believes that attraction is really going to last. So, in looking at all these statistics, I was looking for, where does it last? Is there any example of a relationship? And it wasn't singles, because singles break up as well. There's a lot of passion, but there isn't enough intimacy to sustain a relationship. And I began to find the answer. Do you know what the most written about subject in world history is? What's the most written about subject in world history? I'm trying to get one of these things to work as I talk. Can we put this on? Okay. What's the most written about subject in world history? Anyone know? In world literature. Is it war?
Romance, love.
It's not romance or love either. What is it? What do you think? You'd be very surprised.
Jealousy.
Close. The most common theme in world literature, which also forms the substance of the world's greatest novels, is
Infidelity.
thank you, adultery. Isn't that fascinating? Let's look at the most famous novel of all time is considered to be Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Even War and Peace, which also probably has a claim of being the greatest novel ever written, is all about infidelities. Then look at all the other famous novels, Madame Bovary, Tess, Lady Chatterley's Lover, all about infidelity. Now this interested me. Marriage bores the crap out of people. When you say the word wife, but the mistress, it's his mistress. Husband, it elicits a yawn, but lover. Lover. What was it about adultery? And I began to investigate this. What is it about adultery that fascinates the mind? As in a way that marriage does not. In fact, if you want to find an area where relationships sustain their passion, the only example is infidelity. Do you know that the average wife who cheats, women don't have one-night stands. Women have relationships. They don't want to, but they become very emotionally involved in their infidelities. Do you know how long the average woman's affair lasts? The national average is 3.5 years. And do you know in all that time, 3.5 years, the woman, the man report no diminishment of sexual passion. In marriage, it's diminished after 3 hours, okay? You're in the bridal suite 3 hours later, you're already talking about who's going to go to the dry cleaner tomorrow. But in adultery, 3.5 years, and it's just as exciting. In fact, the number one reason that women have affairs is sex. It later becomes emotional. But first and foremost, it's a feeling of sexual neglect on the part of their husbands. That's why shows like Desperate Housewives are so popular. Because for those women who don't want to go the whole way and have an affair, they can live vicariously through people who are prepared to do so. 3.5 years now, why does this not die off? Why in marriage does the passion die off so quickly, but in infidelity it doesn't? That was the first question I had. Anyone here see Diane Lane in Unfaithful? Yeah. Now, Unfaithful was actually, unlike many movies which are garbage, Unfaithful really was based on solid research about how women behave, how married women behave when they have an affair. One thing that was not true in the movie is that they portray Richard Gere as a very loving, very involved husband. 96% of women who have a loving and involved husband don't cheat. Women overwhelmingly only are unfaithful if they have a neglectful spouse. So that was a bad detail. But the rest of it, number one, how she slowly becomes so enamored with her lover that she can't focus on anything else. Even her children aren't neglected. She leaves them at school. Very common thing. Women become obsessed about this guy that they're having an affair with. So much so that their most prized possession, their children, are almost forgotten through the process. Number two, they start becoming ladies. Do you know one of the biggest giveaways? You know how men are caught in affairs? By and large, husbands are caught in affairs just by their sheer stupidity. Oaths. Her underwear is in the glove compartment. He's got 10,000 phone calls that he made from the house to one number, some of which... And who's this one you're speaking to? She's a telemarketer. Called a telemarketer 50 days. Yeah, I'm trying to buy you an anniversary present. Men give themselves away. In fact, so much so that a lot of psychologists say they want to be found out. I don't believe that's true. I think they're just stupid. But be that as it may. Do you know how women's affairs are discovered? It's almost never with the husband finding out. Because again, if the whole reason she has an affair is because he never focuses on his wife, then he's not going to focus on her having an affair either. Do you know how women's affairs are found out? She starts exercising, she starts going to the gym, and she starts growing her hair long, and she stops wearing cotton undergarments, she starts wearing silk undergarments. All of these things were portrayed in the movie, but it's all true. She's becoming a lady. She feels that somebody notices now. Before, everything was just convenient. Cotton as opposed to silk because it's easier to wash, it's more comfortable. Now someone notices when she takes off her clothes, so it has to be sexier, it has to be lacy frills, etc., etc. Women give themselves away by becoming ladies again. That's how enamored they are of this act of infidelity. And then this is what I tried to do. I said to myself, unfaithfulness and adultery is the single greatest sin that any man or woman could perform in their marriage. And we're not going too deeply into this because studies actually show that more than 90% of Americans consider infidelity a sin. It's the last great, pedophilia and adultery are the last great sexual sins. With everything else, it's okay. Premarital sex was once sinful. Today, if you don't have sex, you're weird. You're 20 and you haven't, man, you are weird. So that's gone by the wayside. The last sexual sin, and of course homosexuality is no longer seen as sinful. The last sexual sin is still adultery. So I'm not going to elaborate on how painful this is. Spouse, etc. I've counseled many couples where there's been unfaithfulness and it's absolutely devastating. But my thinking was, could we reduce unfaithfulness and infidelity to a series of principles? To a series of principles that could be bottled and brought into a marriage, so that a man's wife could become his mistress, so that a woman's husband could become her lover. I'll tell you what I mean. These are the kinds of questions that I was asking. The average beach in America, where women today walk around, women used to wear single-piece bathing suits, then they started wearing bikinis. Now they wear like thongs and strings.